Last week, I built an AI agent that saves me hours every day managing my email. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I did that. We're going to be using n8n and keeping this completely beginner friendly. So zero code. And if you've never used n8n before, don't worry. We're going to go through this step by step. First things first, though, what is n8n? So n8n is a workflow automation tool that ultimately allows us to connect AI models like OpenAI to the tools that we use every day. We can build AI agents that go and do the work inside those tools that we would otherwise do manually. Now, you may be familiar with tools like Zapier and Make.com already. There's one big difference between those tools and n8n, which is that Make.com, Zapier tend to work in a linear fashion. When a trigger happens, do this, then that. Whereas n8n is node-based. What this means is that instead of being constrained by a linear series of events, we can do things like run tasks in parallel. We can add loops. Ultimately, this makes it less constrained. We can take the ideas in our head, the things that we want to build workflows around, and we have a far better chance of building them inside n8n than tools that only work with linear processes. So I think the best way to learn n8n as a beginner is to walk through building a workflow automation together. So I'm going to head over to the n8n website and we'll talk through any important features as we go. So the first thing I think worth knowing is that n8n has two versions. There's a cloud-hosted version where you pay a monthly fee for it. There's also a self-hosted version where you can run it locally on your computer. Two advantages of that. Firstly, it's free. And secondly, if you work in a big organization where data, privacy, and security are concerned, knowing that you can run n8n in a kind of fenced-off environment might be useful. However, for the vast majority of users, the cloud version is going to make more sense, just a bit easier to get started with. So I'm going to click Get Started, enter my information, and that's going to take me to a page like this. I'm going to click Open Instance, and that will take us here. Now, before we start building our first workflow, I want to address how beginner-friendly n8n is, because you're going to see things that might be a little bit intimidating, lots of JSON code. If you're not technical, then that could be a little bit intimidating. I want to encourage you to not let that put you off for two reasons. Firstly, none of it is blocking. In other words, you don't need to use that. That stuff is there for the developers and the people that want to use it, but you can use n8n perfectly fine without ever touching any of that stuff. Secondly, n8n has a really helpful assistant where anytime you need to enter information, if you're not sure what to enter, you can just ask the assistant and it gives really good step-by-step instructions as to what to do. So it's very rare in n8n that you have a situation where you actually have to do anything with code. But I want to address it at this point because sometimes, particularly people that are new to n8n, it might be a little bit overwhelming to see a big wall of JSON and wonder what do I do with that? Answer is you don't need to do anything with it. So in terms of building your first workflow, I'm a firm believer that in terms of getting up and running as quickly as possible, you want to get a win. You want to find a way of building something in n8n that actually gets you excited and makes you want to use it. So I highly recommend looking at the templates. So n8n has thousands of pre-built templates that other people have already made. And we can search through here. So if you're into crypto, you could build something that takes crypto data and sends you a daily email alert. You could, if you use Notion, you can build something that summarizes your Notion documents. Whatever is going to be something that you're going to use daily, that is where I would start. One caveat is I would recommend starting with something that doesn't have too many different tools involved, maybe two. Because if you pick something where it's like taking your Gmail, sending it to Notion, summarizing it in OpenAI, and then sending you a message on WhatsApp, you're going to spend the next half an hour just connecting, finding API keys and connecting all that stuff. And it's not going to be particularly fun. So I would start with something with maybe two tools that is going to actually be useful. Search for it in the templates and start there. The reason being that by starting with a template, you don't have to work out how to build everything. You can sort of start with something someone else has built and then see how that's working. However, before we go through that, I'm going to show you one that I did using Gmail to Todoist. We're going to just quickly look at a really, really simple workflow, just to kind of talk through some basic concepts. So I'm going to click here, use free, copy it into my account. Here we go. So you can see initially it's asking me to connect Google Gemini. I'm going to skip this for now because I'm not going to use Google Gemini. I'm going to use OpenAI instead. So we don't need to connect that just yet. And normally when you use a template, you'll see like there's lots of these sticky notes and annotations explaining how the template works. This is really useful, but for now, I'm just going to get rid of these, just kind of keep this a little bit simpler. So all we can see here is this workflow has a chat interface. We can ask it questions. It's then sending it to an AI agent. And that AI agent is currently connected to Google Gemini. I'm actually going to change that to OpenAI just to show you that it doesn't really matter. Whatever one you have, we've got a free n8n account, which has got 100 credits. So we're just going to connect that to OpenAI. And it's got basic simple memory, which is just going to store the last kind of 5 conversations or so, 30 conversations. And then it's got some tools. It's got the ability to go and get the weather and get the news. So we can test this. I can click here and say, what is the weather in London today? And we can see it working. It's sending a message to, so this has actually got bad request. Here we go, it's done it. And then it's returning as a message saying, so this is not that impressive, right? Like if you did this in ChatGPT or Claude, you would get the same, but it just shows a very simple example of how this works. So you see here, we've got the chat model, the memory, and tools. Tools are really important. So if we click here, you can see that n8n has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tools. You can connect these, and this is what allows n8n to go and take actions in the tools that you use. I'll also briefly touch on a few other bits and pieces. So in terms of building our workflow, we've got a few options. You can see we've already got an AI agent here, so we can connect AI models, we can add AI agents in here. We've got actions in tools. We can transform data. So similar in a way to Zapier. Flow, so we've got some more complex things we can do here. We can do if statements, we can do loops, we can filter, we can merge things. Again, this will kind of make a bit more sense in a moment. We can run code, we can scrape websites, we can connect to FTP, all sorts of stuff. And then lastly, this is quite a handy one. You can add humans in the loop. So if you want, for example, let's take an example. It takes your emails, it writes a reply, but you may not want it to just send back replies to people without you knowing. So instead, what you could do is add a human in the loop where it sends you a message on Slack or Gmail saying, here's my reply, are you happy for me to hit send? You can then approve it and then it sends it. So you can add yourself in the loop. It doesn't have to be completely automated. So that's kind of some of the basics, just a few little useful things. If you double click into any step, you can see how it's set up. Again, this is kind of to the point of you're going to see things where like, what the hell is this? Something kind of useful. So all this is doing is saying, take the input from the chat, but we don't really need to know that. All you can see is this is the input and we can just drag that chat input and it's just turning it into this little JSON thing. So you can see it says, what is the weather in London today? We're just taking that and then we're running this prompt and then that's the output. So again, think of it kind of like Zapier. You've got your input. This is what the step's doing. Then this is the output. You can run any step just by clicking it just to test it. And if it's got a little tick, it's evaluated correctly. Here we can see it's not worked. So we can go in and see what's happened. But in this case, I'm not going to worry too much about that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, like some of the real basics. Next, I thought we would walk through a slightly more interesting use case. So I'm going to do the one that I built last week that automates my inbox. So I'm a pretty prolific user of Todoist. So I wanted something that took my emails, worked out if there was anything I needed to do for that email, and then if so, turn it into a task and send it to Todoist. So I found someone that already basically built this. So here we go, pass Gmail inbox and transform into Todoist task with solve propositions. So we can have a look at how it works, but I'm pretty happy. I've seen this before, but I'll just wait for that to load. So you can see how this is happening. So I'm going to click use for free and add it to my account. So you can see it's needing 4 things here. We need to connect my email, we need to add Todoist, Gmail, and we've already connected OpenAI. So I'm just going to go through and connect all those together. So first thing that's useful to do is just try and get a bit of a bird's eye view of what the logic is doing. So here we can see that we've got a trigger, we've got a couple of options. It can run on a schedule, it can run when an email arrives, or we can just click test and it'll run. It's going to go and get some emails, get some tasks from Todoist, bung them all together, and then this is where the magic happens. It's basically then going to send it to an AI agent. If I double click into this, we can see how this is set up. So there's, it's basically saying you're an email assistant, read the email, figure out if I need to do anything, and then output a list of actions that I need to do. And this has got something called an output parser, which is a fancy way of basically saying, make sure the output is in a specific format so that we can send that into Todoist in a nice, clean way. And then it's going and creating a Todoist task. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but to some extent, we don't need to worry too much about understanding that. Firstly, because this is the first n8n workflow we're building. Really, this is about just getting a sense of how n8n works and just kind of learning through seeing what other people are building. But also someone else has built this template. They've done a lot of the thinking, a lot of the kind of heavy lifting for us. So you can put some trust in that, but at a very basic level, all we need to know is kind of like, does the logic make sense? And then we can sort of double click into anything and see, like here, for example, I want to make sure this is getting stuff from my task list, not my inbox. And then we can click execute and run it. I don't think I've got any unread emails right now. So I think, yeah, this isn't gonna execute, but I ran this this morning and it was adding lots of, it was doing a pretty good job. So you can see here, I got an email about my account being funded with $10, and you can see it's proposing actions, and it's added that as a task into Todoist. As I say, finding a template that interests you, keep it nice and simple, and just have a bit of a play around, because I think the best way, there's so much that you can learn, so much that you can do with n8n, that I think just getting started with a simple use case that makes sense to you is going to allow you to pick up some of the basic concepts and have some stuff working. And then over time, you can just build more things and learn more features, and then go back to the old workflows that you started with and make improvements to them. But I hope that's been useful. Any questions about n8n, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.